Things Are Getting Weird, an essay by Matt Ruby. That's me. Remember this?
When they go low, we go high.
Yeah, that was all very 2016. Now, taking the higher ground is for suckers. You gotta change with the times, and we've entered the age of rage.
That stuff is weird. They come across weird. They seem obsessed with this.
The fascists depend on fear. The fascists depend on us going back. But we're not afraid of weird people. We're a little bit creeped out, but we're not afraid.
Listen to the guy. He's talking about Hannibal Lecter and shocking sharks and just whatever crazy thing pops into his mind. And I thought we just give him way too much credit. Well, it's true. These guys are just weird.
My first reaction? Wait a minute, is the Democratic Party anti-weirdos now? Jeez, I truly am politically homeless. But why is this whole they're weird thing sticking? What? Well, for one thing,
we're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies.
Childless cat ladies. I mean, it is kind of weird. I'd like to offer up another reason, though. The art and culture around the whole GOP is so damn bad. I mean, for a bunch of God-fearing folks, these guys sure do consume god-awful things. The outfits are tacky, Kid Rock is lame, and those Cybertrucks look like urinals. None of it is aspirational. It's just Waffle House meets Bass Pro Shop meets QVC. The party could level up and do a Mad Men Martini vibe. After all, that's conservative classic. But instead, it chooses to give Real Housewives on speed. Or to give another reality TV example, the left seems like Queer Eye, while MAGA is the he lives with his mom straight guy desperately in need of a makeover. I know I sound like just another coastal elite who's out of touch with quote-unquote real America, but I don't buy that. People sniff out hypocrites, and the whole MAGA cult feels like a trickle-down $60 Bible con. Americans may be idiots as individuals, but as a crowd, they possess wisdom. And plenty of us are tired of the in-your-face deception. The flag pins worn by those who deny election results, venture capitalists who went to Yale yet also claim to hate the elites, the pickup trucks that never haul anything, the thoughts and prayers families who send out holiday cards with their kids holding assault rifles, the working class heroes who give tax breaks to billionaires, and the hate-spewing social media accounts that list themselves as Christian/husband in their bios. What would Jesus do? Probably not spend all day dunking on tweens with blue hair. After a while, it's all just a bit insulting. But is weird the right term for these guys? Because some self-described weirdos on the left are pushing back because, well, we've always been taught weird is kind of good. Here's a sample post I found online. My only gripe about calling the GOP and its politicians weird is that I think weird is generally a good thing. Like we should lean into our weirdness and not denigrate it in others. Being weird is how you discover hobbies, your unique personality, find your passions, and so much more. Weird is good. And I get that. And look, let's be honest, I'm pretty weird too. But also, I'm cool with it as an insult because, hey, whatever works. It does make me wish the word freak was used more, though. Because that feels even more appropriate. I'd sum it up this way. The weirdos on the left are out here calling the freaks on the right weird because it's the best way to get under their skin. And that's because freaks spend their lives pretending they're not weird, since, in reality, they're extra weird and very scared that people are going to find them out. Meanwhile, the normies are like, look, you're all weird. And you know what? They're right. It's also been fun watching the right try to figure out how to attack their new opponent. Trump called Kamala a California socialist. And my question is, that like being California sober? Because if so, that just means she's not really socialist. And now Jake Paul is even endorsing Trump, which is how I realized Jake Paul is Gen Z's Hulk Hogan. And then that Tim Pool guy, who is legit a freak, posted this. Kamala's Project Special K makes Project 2025 look like daycare. She will force women to get abortions, send military to kidnap poor Hondurans and make them live in your homes, and she will start 800 new wars. God help us. Is that a joke? Or is he serious? At this point, I literally have no idea. I give these guys credit for getting wild, though. Kind of makes me feel like the left keeps bringing a knife to a gunfight. Libs are like, JD's weird, while MAGA is like, Kamala's going to have a Honduran shortstop sleeping in your bathtub. Also, I know it's Kamala, but I feel like if I'm doing their voice, I should say it. Kamala, Anyway, I hope the left doesn't lean too hard into this whole brat summer thing, though, because, I don't know, I kind of refuse to figure out what it actually means. I'm pretty sure this formula works for it, though. Brat summer equals Taylor Swift plus Kamala Harris divided by 2 times skinny girl margaritas? I think that's right, anyway. I'll tell you this, though. I will not be joining the white male brats for Harris Zoom call that is probably coming. Because look, the only way I'm going to pay money is to not have to participate in a Zoom call with 10,000 people on it. Just sounds like a nightmare. Meanwhile, we've got J.D. Vance ranting against childless cat ladies, which certainly isn't helping his cause. I do have to say, though, this exchange was like superb joke structure.
Obviously, it was a sarcastic comment. I've got nothing against cats.
Ah, perfect joke craft. Kind of reminds me of this Curb episode.
You know what you are?
What am I?
You're a self-loathing Jew.
Am I?
Oh,
Well,
yes,
let me tell you
yes,
something.
yes, yes.
Jewish. I
Jewishness.
do hate myself,
You- yeah.
but it has nothing to do with being Jewish.
Anyway, let me know if us childless folks get to pay less in taxes while the 1776 breeders get extra votes. Otherwise, I'm going to have to resurface that whole no taxation without representation thing from, well, you know when. Oh, here we go. Man, it really is all just so goddamn... What's the right word? Strange.
People are strange when you're a stranger. Faces look ugly when you're alone. Women seem wicked when you're unwanted. Streets are uneven.
Now let's welcome in producer Jeremiah McVeigh to discuss. Hey, Jeremiah.
Yeah, so this use of weird as a term has definitely been interesting to see. I guess like one thing that I wanted to point to is I've seen people online kind of wondering why this is what they landed on. And if I understood it correctly and remember it correctly, I think that it came from when she was running for president in 2020. And one of her staff asked her, like, if you become the nominee and you're debating Trump in the general election, what would you do if Trump acted like he did debating Hillary Clinton, where he was kind of looming over her in the background and very imposing and just kind of being a weirdo? And she said, like, I would just say, why are you being so weird? And I think that that's kind of what kicked it off, even though I've heard like people attributing it now to Tim Walz for going out there and really kind of kicking it up. But I kind of think he took it from her.
Interesting.
I don't know.
The first exposure I had to it was Tim Walz, but that'd be interesting if it came from her. Just another white man taking credit for the work of a black lady. Here we go again.
I don't think it's taking credit. I think he knew what he was doing, and it seems very coordinated and well done.
I will say one thing about it. I think I think this comes from being a comedian. I think people go with what works. So you throw out a lot of stuff, and then all of a sudden, if it like goes on social media and people start, reposting it, or people are responding to it, that's like, oh, there's something here. So I think, there was just some from the ground up reason that this has landed and kind of sustained. It's because people are like, yeah, they are weird. Thank you.
Yeah. But to kind of the point, I guess, or at least part of the point of what you were getting at is it the right term? And I think there's been a lot of confusion of like, oh yeah, there's people on both sides who are weird. So isn't it odd to have this word used in a way that is on one side denigrating, but on the other side uplifting in a way? And to me, it's kind of self-sorting. It's like if it makes you upset to be called weird, you're giving yourself away.
To me, there's something about weird that, and this might be like a Gen X thing, but I associate it with counterculture, alternative, something about being an outsider in some way. And I think part of the problem here is when weird gets elevated to a position of power, because obviously there are weird people on the left too. There's a lot of fringe stuff going on, But in general, I see so much, anger and vitriol about like libs of TikTok or something like that. I'm like, those people don't have any power. They're not the ones in charge. And then I look at the right and I see Stephen Miller and Steve Bannon and Roger Stone and that Boris Epstein guy, and now even JD Vance, and of course Trump. I'm like, you guys are weird and in charge, and that's messed up. I don't mind weirdos when they're on the fringes, just sort of like heckling or throwing stones, but when they're the ones actually running the show, then is when I think people are rightfully alarmed by like, okay, you guys are kind of weird, and like also you're in charge of me and my rights and my freedoms, and I'm not comfortable with that.
Yeah, I think power touches on what I was going to bring up next, actually, specifically. But I will say that I think maybe libs of TikTok actually does have some power because it seems influential.
I'm talking about the people on libs of TikTok that they're featuring are usually just like weirdos who don't have any power.
Oh, gotcha.
The account itself obviously can stir up stuff, but yeah, I'm glad we got to clarify that libs of TikTok thing, because I think it is a little bit about, in comedy, what we talk about punching up versus punching down, which can be a little bit of like a hacky notion, but there is something there about like, it's one thing if you're making fun of people like who are in charge of stuff and who have power. It's another thing if you're mocking people who are like disabled or homeless or something else. Those are the extreme versions. But even within this context, it's also like, hey, are you mocking like some confused, teenager with blue hair who like posted something on TikTok? Or are you mocking the guy who's like coming up with the political strategy for the president of the United States? Because those are two different things and two different aspects of power. And there's a different kind of who deserves this and who doesn't going on there.
Yeah. Also on the point of power, though, I wanted to bring this up. I was listening to Slate Political Gabfest, and Emily Bazelon, I thought, put it well, where she was talking about like, why has this worked when calling people on the right, say like bully, doesn't work? And it's because when you call someone a bully, you're basically giving away your power. You're saying that you are more powerful than me. You're in the power spot as a bully. But if you're calling someone weird, it's more like saying like, we're on equal footing, but you're weird in a bad way. So I thought that was an interesting point, and maybe does go some way to talking about like why this attack is sticking and working in a way that all the right, correct things that were being lobbed against the people on the right previously were as correct as they might be. They just weren't working. They weren't doing the job, So do you think there's something to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think bully specifically as a term could be aspirational for a lot of these dudes, because it invokes like you have power, you're in control of the situation, you're telling other people what to do. I think that's not necessarily something that they would reject or not want to be associated with. Whereas weird, part of why it's working is I think is usually associated with the other side. Oh, you're the weirdos. You're the on the fringe. You're the radicals, or and now they're kind of like being forced to confront that term when it's being used to describe them. And I think there's some power in that. And then I think also it's a really tough descriptor to deny. Like JD Vance is out here being like, I'm not weird. I'm a normal guy. Nothing's more suspicious than when someone tries to insist to you that they're normal. Like, I'm like, normal people don't have to go around lecturing people about how normal they are. The same way like nice guys don't have to actually keep telling you over and over again that they're a nice guy or a good guy. It's like, yeah, we should just be able to tell. The more you have to keep telling me, the more suspicious it gets.
Yeah, it's definitely a turning of the tables, I think, But will that turning of the tables then negate the positive use of the word weird that's developed over the year, of like people who were once called weird as a derogatory expression, kind of reclaiming the word and wearing it with a badge of pride, as a badge of pride? Like, is that going to go away? Do you think, does this risk killing that, or is that overblown?
I don't know. Maybe some new word will develop out of this that describes the old meaning of weird. And I also think on some level, and this might be a stretch, we have such a monoculture right now where I wonder if things are weird anymore. Everything mainstream and weird seems to be blurring together in a way that like we all just live in these little niches and bubbles and can't agree on anything except for maybe like Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. But otherwise, like we don't even have a shared reality anymore. So maybe it is that we're all weird. Maybe we've all
I was
become
going to say, I
sort of
think it's that. I
weirdos in
think
our
it
own
is
way,
that.
and we don't even realize it because we're surrounded by other people who agree with our weirdness.
Yeah, I think when you said we all live in our niches, like, yeah, that's because we all have our brand of weird that we're identifying with and kind of gathering around a central point with other people.
Well, that seems to be the shocking thing to these people on the right. They're like, what do you mean I'm weird? I go to a rally and everyone's wearing Trump sneakers and the same weird signs that I have. And like, we're normal. And it's like, no, there's a
Yeah.
whole other world out here that's not showing up in your timeline. And it's
Well, I
almost
think
like,
that's related to the whole idea of this being minority rule that we have when when Republicans are in charge
Mhm.
now, is because they still get talked about as if they are a party that represents half the country, and they don't. They don't represent half the country. They haven't won popular votes in most of the elections in the recent decades at the national level. And the only reason that they hold as much power as they do nationally is because of the way the Senate works and gerrymandering in House districts,
sure. And
and
electoral college too.
in the Electoral College, of course.
That
So,
I'll push back a little bit
so
against that,
they've
which
been led to believe that they are the mainstream when they have been increasingly a party of weirdos over the years.
I'm going to push back at that on that somewhat because it's still 55-45 or 60-40. So there is still a huge swath of the country that is on their side. I think it's not necessarily that they care about whether or not they're the majority. I just think they're right. I think they're standing up for Jesus and America and freedom and something that needs to be defended. So even if the actual numbers don't matter to them because they represent the one truth. And, that's their power doesn't come from, the number of people who agree with them. It comes from the righteousness of their views. I'm not saying they're right, but I think in their heads, that's why it's okay, even if it is, 55% versus 45%. They're like, yeah, but they're a bunch of baby murderers and we're saving lives. So if you really believe that, then of course you'd fight for it. Why would you back down just because majority disagrees with you? Yeah, and you could make that same argument about civil rights in the 60s. Maybe it was 55-45 against or gay marriage up until 10 years ago. And people are like, well, the majority disagrees with us, but we're right. And so we're going to keep fighting for it. And so you can see how you can, sort of convince yourself that you're still in the right, even if the numbers are stacked against you. But you have to do some heavy lifting of you're the righteous ones and the opponents are not. One more thing I'll add, just because you instigated this thought in my head, it does feel like it's real life breaking through the timeline. Like a bunch of people who are surrounded by people who agree with them all the time online and are made to feel like they're normal are suddenly being forced to confront this idea that the rest of society does not agree, does not consume the information they consume, and is coming from a totally different point of view. And it's like, hey, we don't get it. We think you're weird. And it's a bunch of people who are extremely online, at least, are being forced to confront some reality that they didn't know existed. And I think there's something really healthy about that.
I hope it's healthy. We'll see.
Well, you got to start somewhere. Acknowledging reality is always a good first step to rehabilitation. And now it's time for some quickies. I can't believe people spend so much time arguing with strangers online. It's like, don't you people have families? Argue with them. We've gotten so flaky that even restaurants come off as clingy now. You get a text at 5 p.m. They're like, hey, are we still on for dinner tonight? Because I haven't heard from you. I just want to know where this is headed, okay? The big reveal of the 21st century is that supplements are the ideal way to monetize idiocy. Getting a tattoo is like getting married. The younger you are when it happens, the more likely you are to regret it. You can subscribe to or follow this show just about anywhere you listen to podcasts. If you have a moment, please rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods, or anywhere else that allows you to do that. And when I say that, I mean leave it a good review. I feel like that's obvious, but if you're just going to leave it a bad review, you don't have to. Anyway, it helps others find the show, which I really appreciate. If you want to reach out to me directly, you can email me at mattruby@hey.com. That's mattruby@hey.com. And if you like this podcast, you should subscribe to the Rubes Letter, where what you just heard first appeared. You can find that at mattrubycomedy.com/subscribe. And while you're at mattrubycomedy.com, you can also find links to my Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok, where I post clips of my stand-up and other stuff too. Thanks so much for listening. I appreciate it.
This podcast is produced by Stereoactive Media.